I'm really excited to be joining all of you today. My name is Tammy Rutherford. I am the Managing Director here at Rusticy Software and at Watershed. And today's topic is uniting corporate and higher education, shaping a brighter future. So what does that mean exactly, or what we'll be talking about? Historically, we've seen a pretty distinct division between the learning technologies and tools that support the education space, academia, higher education, and the corporate training and learning environments. And that was by design. So historically, we've seen the technologies grow up and diverge over the last 20 or so years. But we're sort of facing a point where we've got to really think about ways that we can collaborate and work well together, kind of work across the aisle, if you will. So thinking about ways to sort of flatten those verticals and encourage collaboration and partnership across our academic and corporate and learning and training environments. Now more than ever, it's really important to be thinking about this as we look at a widening skills gap and ways that we can encourage partnership and collaboration to not only ensure a skilled workforce, whether it's job-ready candidates coming into the workforce, or finding ways to reskill and upskill our existing workforce that we have today. So let's dive in and talk a little bit more about what that looks like. Here we go. Before we begin diving right into things, it might be helpful to understand a little bit more about Rusticy Software and who we are for those of you who might not be familiar with us. Rusticy Software has been working with the e-learning standards since 2002, so 22 years. We've been spending all of our time focusing on standards such as SCORM, XAPI, CMI5, LTI, AICC, basically all of the acronyms you'll see out in the e-learning space. And we've worked with the agencies that oversee and govern these standards, as well as the communities of practice themselves. So we're passionate about these standards. Not only do we build software products that support them and make it easy to implement in your learning technology, whether you're an LMS or a content provider or publisher, but we also work with organizations that also add these standards to the products that they build for their own internal purposes. So we've seen a wide variety of customers that we serve today. What we look like before we jump into that, we're a team of 58 as of today. We just brought on our 58th person. And while we're headquartered in Franklin, Tennessee, we are found all over the US. So we're a fully hybrid working environment today. And so you'll find us across all of the time zones here in the US, and our teams support everything from the products that we build to the communities at large that use our free software testing tool, SCORM Cloud, to test the content that they build. So you'll find us in many places across the industry. And one of the reasons why we're having this conversation today is because of the increase and trend we have seen where we're seeing an increased interest from our customers on ways to improve how their courseware and content is made available to a wider audience of people than historically they've served. And I do see a note here, just in case you haven't noticed the chat, quick housekeeping as we're just getting started. Please post questions if you have them along the way. We'll hold answers to those towards the end, just in the interest of time. But if you think of questions, please post them in the question section. And you'll also see in that chat, you'll see some information coming in from Tara, Alicia, and Josh, our marketing team behind the scenes here. We'll provide some information for you along the way. So keep an eye out for those two things, and please ask questions as we go along. But back to us to see who we serve and why we're talking about this today. We serve a wide variety of audiences. In the middle here, you'll see learning platforms, and we serve thousands of customers around the globe, but the majority fall into this camp of learning platforms or vendors in the learning technology space. That's everything from LMS providers across both education. You'll see that top line there, three of the biggest platforms to serve the education community, and Blackboard, Canvas, and D2L are Brightspace. And we also work with corporate LMS providers across the globe, from anything from industry specialties such as HealthStream in the healthcare space, to SumTotal, who focuses, on large multinational organizations. So our software runs under the hood of the platforms that serve a wide variety of audiences. But we also serve industry and companies directly and organizations and associations. So many of our customers in this space look like associations that provide continuing education training to a wide variety of audiences. We work with a lot of federal government agencies, not only the CDC, but also Department of Defense agencies, including most of the military branches, as well as large multinational companies that have needs to provide um, custom training programs that they're building, but they still need standards to make those things work well together. And that's where we come in. And then we also work a lot with publishers and content providers. So authoring tools like Articulate use our products under the hood, as well as large content libraries leverage our software to make sure that their content is compatible across a variety of systems. So we've seen a lot over the last 22 years, and that's one of the reasons why we're talking here today. We're very passionate about helping content and systems play well together. And the use case we're going to be looking at more today is how can we do that in the context of education-centric systems and corporate-centric systems and content, and figuring out ways that we can bridge that gap. So while we're talking about ways to fill that gap, one of the big things that we've seen is there's a huge drive and benefit to do this. So we'll talk a little bit more about what are the reasons why we might want to see um, education-based content delivered in a corporate LMS environment, or ways that corporations and industry can provide valuable content and resources to pre-skill a future workforce. So we think about filling the skills gap. There are opportunities here to share curriculum and content across these two verticals to help improve the skills of our workforce overall. I mentioned that we've sort of come up as two very distinct and separate verticals or siloed types of learning technologies over the past 20, 25 years. And we'll look a little bit more about why. So how did we get here? Why do these systems look different? Why are they designed so differently? It's important to understand sort of how we got here, because as we talk about breaking down the silos and how do we bridge this gap and make it easier for industry and academia to work better together within the learning technologies and platforms that they have today, it's helpful to understand what people actually do have and how they can work better together. And then it's always helpful to understand practical examples in the real world. What does this look like today? And so we'll look at a couple of different use cases that we've seen just to give you a little more inspiration in ways that you might be able to take this back into your own organization. So before we dive in, it would be really helpful to understand who you all are. So I've given you a little background on Rustici Software and why we're here. I think Tara just put up a quick poll here. If you can let us know what side of the equation you sit on, whether you are coming from the corporate side and interested in finding ways to better partner with your academic institutions, whether local or global, on the higher ed side of things, or if you're a vendor that maybe serves one or two of these audiences. Let us know if you build products or if you're using those products, and if so, on what side you might land. Cool. All right, this is interesting. So we've got actually a pretty even split across the board. So it looks like we've got representation across all sides of the equation here. So that's actually really fun. So now that we've got a better idea of who you are, we'll talk just a minute on divergence, or how did these systems grow up so differently, and how did we sort of see systems that are supporting both education, higher ed specifically here, and corporate training. Why did they look different? And it's some of this is probably going to be pretty obvious, so this might just be a little bit of a refresher for you. But if you really think about it, the intent, the methodologies, the objectives of educating learners versus training them are incredibly different. And so the systems are designed to support the different methodologies that we're seeing here. On the higher ed side of things, it's really about the why do we do things, the foundational concepts, the abstract and theoretical when it comes to gaining knowledge and teaching and teaching. So you're going to see on the higher ed side of things systems that are more designed to support longer running formats of courses and to partake to to deliver those foundational concepts. So much more theoretical, um, longer running. It takes time to develop all of that knowledge. So we'll dig in. Next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more about what a courses actually look like in these systems, but you need a little bit of time to develop all of that knowledge and training. And so the systems are designed to provide the environment in which to do so. The corporate training side looks a little bit different, right? It's not about as much about the theoretical. It's about how to do things. It's more practical. It's the application of the knowledge that you've gained, and how do you use that in your job today? So hands-on based skill development and training. And imagine that you're doing this in the workflow, in the flow of your work. So it's going to be on the job training just in time. Think about the formats and the types of systems that you might design to cater to a learner that actually needs to do something right this minute, in 5 minutes. So, which is often the case when we look at corporate training programs. So the systems were sort of built to and designed to support that type of learning environment. If we go one level deeper here and kind of look at what does this mean, especially when we think about the content or the courseware and curriculum that's being developed and delivered in these systems. Um, on the academic side of things, and the higher ed side, courses actually in an education-based learning management system, it's not a it's not just one thing, right? It's one to many. A course is actually a container of multiple objects and assets, and it's often built within the LMS itself. So it's not a defined or discrete package like you might see on the corporate side. It's actually something that an instructor might build within the LMS that contains multiple assets and some, quizzes, reference documents, all sorts of assets might be in there, but it's actually a one-to-many sort of relationship. On the corporate side of things, a course is a very specific, distinct thing. It typically um, takes about an hour or less, so it's taking minutes um, to complete that course. Courses might be anything from a short video to maybe, something that runs 30 minutes or so if it's compliance based. But you're going to see things that are definitely a little bit more discrete, specific, and a one-to-one ratio. So it's going to be a single file equals a course on the corporate side of things. And oftentimes, these courses are actually built and created outside of the LMS and imported into the corporate LMS. So think about building a course in an authoring tool, or maybe purchasing something from a subject matter expert to supplement your content library. So those courses are built outside of the LMS and come in. If we think about the content itself and the frequency in which it's maintained and updated, on the education side of things, these courses run months, right? So they're probably about 12 weeks long to complete an entire course of all, and accessing all of those assets within that course. Um, and they're probably refreshed maybe once a semester. So maybe, semi-annually, you're going to come in and refresh that course, but you're not going to see those courses change much throughout the semester. It's a pretty defined curriculum. On the corporate side of things, content and courses change frequently. So if we think about best practices on how to do something, a skill might change, a process might change. You might be training somebody on a product that just had a new release. So content and courseware on the corporate side of things is much more dynamic when it comes to the management and maintenance of those courses themselves. We talked a little bit about how long does a course take? The definition of course, again, we're thinking about a long running, months long program that's instructor led on the higher ed side of things, or the academic um, institution use cases. On the corporate side of things, it's typically an assignable thing. It's a discrete assignment, probably based on what your role is within the organization. And the expectation is that it should take you minutes to complete this activity or course versus months. And it's really, if you think about it, on the higher ed side of things, the learner's job is to take that course. That's their primary use case. That's the purpose of why they're in this, why they're in that LMS to begin with, is to take that course and to complete that course. On the corporate side of things, content and courses in a corporate LMS, it's something that they have to do their job, but it is not their primary job. So if we think about the jobs to be done here, and the learner use cases across these two instances are very different. On the higher ed side, the learner's job is to take that course. On the corporate side of things, the learner has to take that course to do their job. So as a result, these systems have been designed with those things in mind, to make it easily accessible on the corporate side and to make it a little bit more fluid and useful on the higher ed side of things for those learners. When we think about the data that's captured across these two use cases, it's going to look a lot different as well. So on the higher ed side, we're talking about sort of a macro level report or reflection of what a student has done within that course that ultimately culminates in a final grade, right? So you've got all of those months of work that you've done in that course. Maybe you've taken a few quizzes, submitted some essays, or shown work product along the way. But at the end of the day, that grade book in an education-driven LMS is going to show you a grade that summarizes all of that work over that period of time. Reports on the corporate side of things are going to look a little bit different. We're talking a little bit more micro, as corporate reporting will span the gamut. So most of the reports that we've seen in the corporate driven LMSs have sort of been designed with compliance as sort of a first class citizen. So what reports do our risk management, our compliance officers, the folks in our organizations, what reports do they need to pull at the end of the year to pass those audits? That was sort of one of the original use cases of a corporate LMS. So we're going to collect things, not only score, but we're going to look at time spent in a course, as well as pass rates and completion rates. So did they complete it? Did they pass it? How long did it take to do that? And possibly a score if that's actually one of the things you're after. So you're going to see those four things pretty commonly in the corporate side of things when it comes to reporting. And now with the introduction of XAPI, which for those of you that aren't familiar, it's the standard that we've seen emerge over the last 10 years that allows you to collect a little bit more granular information than we've seen in the SCORM side of things. Sorry, I was getting a note there on my screen. So yes, on the corporate side of things, we're now seeing an increased interest in going even more micro level on that reporting to get more granular level details around everything from time spent on a slide to tracking all sorts of interactions within a course itself. So the corporate side of things, we're going to get a little bit more micro level on the data that's collected and captured. But if we look at these systems, there's also a standard that supports each. So this divergence wasn't necessarily only in the design of these learning technology platforms, but the standards and the standards bodies that have been supporting these two industries. And the de facto standards you're going to find in each type of learning platform is going to look different. So on the higher ed side of things, one ed tech is sort of the governing body that most educational based learning providers work with, and LTI is going to be the common or de facto standard that you're going to find in those systems. On the corporate side of things, the de facto standard has historically been SCORM. I mentioned XAPI already. We're starting to see an increase in the interest for XAPI and CMI5 within the corporate side, as well as those are gaining adoption. SCORM and XAPI and ultimately CMI5 are standards that have been overseen historically by ADL, which is within the Department of Defense, and more recently has transitioned over to IEEE. So so those are the governing bodies you'll see most likely working with corporate environments to define what reporting requirements are, what interoperability needs to look like on the corporate and government side of things. So that's a little bit of a history lesson as to why these systems look different. And I think the most helpful example here, at least for me, as I was understanding the different needs and use cases of these audiences and why we see systems that look different. A classic example is if we look at a university itself, and I'll use Clemson University as the example here. The systems that they use to provide that their enrolled students use versus the systems that they use to support their administration and faculty and staff aren't the same. So in the case of Clemson, for example, Canvas is the LMS that students log into to take their courseware and curriculum. And so that's what they're using for students within the university. but they're actually using Bridge as the LMS to train and develop their staff, their employees, their administrators, because they have very different needs that we've just described. So that's why we see systems that have grown up so differently, and why organizations might use each one of these, particularly if you're in if you're in an academic institution. All right, so now that we've sort of talked a little bit about the backstory here, how did we get here? Where did this divergence occur and why? Let's talk a little bit more about what do we do next. And so this is where we're going to kind of segue into convergence and what opportunities do we have in front of us. And before we do that, I'm going to let the poll go here that Tara just popped up, and let us know where you are in this journey. If you have started to pursue ways to think about bridging the gap between what side of the equation you're on. If you're on the corporate side of things, do you have programs in place today that partner with education, or are you thinking about it? If you're on the education side of things, are there places where you've looked at opportunities to partner with corporate and industry? And if you're a vendor, do you have a tool, or are you thinking about building tools that could help our education and corporate partners do this together? Let's see, how are we doing here? Okay. So we've got early stage, let's call it that. So let's dive in um, and take a look at what this might look like, and why do it? And I mentioned at the beginning of this session, um, the skills gap is widening. And as we think about making sure that the workforce that we have today is ready for the job that we need them to do today and that they want to be doing today, and also, are they going to be ready for the next job in front of them, or the next job that needs to be done? And as we're seeing, technology is advancing rapidly. We're seeing that impact our workforce dramatically. It's only accelerated with the introduction and the increased adoption of AI over the last, 18 months or so. So really focusing on ways that we can partner together to not only make sure that we have a job ready workforce coming in, but the people that are already in our workforce have the skills and resources to do the next job in front of them. I found the stat recently, and it was remarkable to think that almost half of recent graduates didn't even think they were prepared for an entry-level job coming out of school. So that's a pretty daunting stat if you think about it. After all of that work, and still not feeling like they're prepared enough for that first job. So let's find better ways to make them feel prepared and increase that confidence level. If we look at things on the corporate side of things, we know that there are opportunities in front of us for delivering lifelong learning, that upskilling moment, professional development, to not only make sure that the people that we have that work with us today have the tools and resources to improve and evolve, but they're to retain them. So you have good people that work with you, give them the tools and resources to improve themselves and do even more within your organization. Not only are we talking about upskilling and professional development, but we also know that almost half of our workers today, the skill or the knowledge that they have today will be changing. They will need to learn how to do something else in the next 5 years as their jobs are changing rapidly. So finding ways to provide reskilling opportunities across both education and corporate LMS is another thing that we're looking at. So how do we do that? We've already talked about sort of these two verticals, or these two systems that have sort of grown up over time and what they look like. And there are ways that we can kind of bridge the divide, get that line out of the way, and look at ways to better cross collaborate and break down those silos. We'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like, but before we do that, think about the benefits here of working across the divide, or finding ways to partner better with to create partnerships across institutions and companies alike. And these are all pretty. The nice part about as we look at ways that we can support each other in a pre-skilling context, reskilling, or even upskilling, it's a really symbiotic relationship. So both sides of the equation are going to see benefits here out of investing time to figure out ways to collaborate and partner together. If you imagine on the educational side of things, um, it's important to make sure that the students that you're educating, that you're preparing them for the future. That's why they're there. That is your job. And part of that preparation for the future is making sure that they're ready, that they're job ready, that they can enter the workforce and be successful and get that job and keep that job and evolve. So finding ways for institutions to find ways to partner with companies and industry to make sure that the part of the curriculum they're providing to their students includes those relevant skills and even certifications to prepare their students to be successful in the workforce. Let's try to figure out a way to increase that confidence level, to make sure that we have a little bit higher rate than 50% of people graduating feeling like they can actually apply for their first job. Um, on the corporate side of things, if we think about it, obviously there are huge benefits here for corporate and industry to support that pre-skilling concept and to make sure that, or to help support and provide resources to institutions and academic institutions to make sure that their curriculum includes relevant content to support what those companies need in their workforce. So thinking about pre-skilling their workforce or even pre-skilling their customers, making sure that the people coming into the workforce are job ready so that they can hit the ground running. So there's a huge symbiotic relationship there and why both parties would want to work together to think about pre-skilling our future workforce. Um, and then on the other side of things, when we think about the reskilling and upskilling equation, oftentimes, particularly when it comes to upskilling or professional development, a great resource for that content and curriculum resides within the education or institutions. We talked earlier, they're the ones that are, really responsible for that knowledge foundation, the why to do something, the theoretical, and that's oftentimes the basis of professional development. So if we think about upskilling programs that companies may want to provide to their employees, oftentimes it might be right in front of them with their education partners. So institutions can help support the upskilling efforts that many companies have today by providing that great curriculum and programming to their corporate partners. On the reskilling side of things, this could be anything from partnering with vocational schools that might be really focused on trades and skills development, or even within academic institutions themselves. So reskilling and training somebody how to do something new might happen within the company, but they also should be looking across to their education partners to find where those skills-based training might reside if it's not already in-house. After all, we all have lots on our plates. Budgets are tight. So if there's ways to use resources that are already available to you rather than building it from scratch, that's a great place to start. So let's dive a little bit more into what this looks like. We've already talked a little bit about pre-skilling and that job placement, first job readiness here. So pre-skilling really is the idea of taking practical skills-based training and certification programs, often found within a corporate training setting, and making those available to learners in an educational-based setting. I have here higher ed learners. It doesn't necessarily have to be higher ed. We're talking about adult learners that are in an academic setting of some sort, and that could be within a university setting, a vocational school, or trades-based setting. There's many places you might find this, but thinking about education-centric systems and education-based learners. So being able to access relevant real world training and certification programs within an academic setting on the pre-skill side of the equation. We've already talked about, imagine having somebody graduate that already has certificates that are relevant and valuable in the workplace. Not only are they likely to find a job more quickly, it's probably going to be a higher paying job to help pay down that student loan a little bit faster. And from an employer standpoint, you're going to have somebody that's going to hit the ground running a little bit faster than if you had to provide all of that training and skills-based training to them on the first day. If we come around the dial here, as we think about how do you share curriculum and what does this look like in the context of reskilling, imagine corporate learners, so somebody already in the workforce within their own company's learning platform and the types of training and curriculum you want to make available to them there. And this might be filling the gaps. And if they're reskilling, learning how to do something new, and that could be through a partnership, as I mentioned, with a trade or another educational institution. Not only is it going to help them learn how to do their next job, but it ensures employment. So as we're starting to see some disruption and jobs changing, some jobs, going away completely, reskilling, finding a new home for those people, their new opportunity within your organization is critical. Um, Employee retention is huge as we look at a workforce right now. We've got a lot of job openings out there. So let's make sure that the people that we do work with have opportunities and we're giving them the right skills to do their next job. We think about the evolution even further and coming around that dial over to the left side here. Lastly on this list is upskilling. So again, finding ways to provide and bring educational based curriculum to corporate learners in the environment that they're in today. And this looks a little bit different than reskilling. Upskilling is probably going to be closer to professional development. Think about maybe an executive MBA program or something that's longer running, a true investment into your employees for them to take on the next larger job within your organization. Not only are you going to see the employee retention, but imagine that benefit you're going to provide to your employees if you're able to give them that type of professional development. And again, promoting within and developing your own internal employees. It's what we do here at Rusticy, and it really has been successful for us. And so finding ways to upskill and develop your existing workforce for the next job that you want them to do. That's where we really see the value and the benefit of upskilling. All right, so this is great in the theory, right? So we've talked a lot about um, how you might do this and the ideas around it, but when it really comes down to it, how do you practically how do people execute on these ideas or programs? And I'll share with you two. And one of this one is actually close to me. It's been a fun one to watch develop over the years. So AWS Academy started in 2017, and the goal here was really student preparedness, bridging the gap between academia and corporate. And what does that mean? AWS created a cloud computing certification program. So this program includes a semester's worth of content and curriculum that AWS Academy makes available to instructors and professors in universities around the world. So these instructors have pre-built curriculum and content. So they don't have to build anything. They're able to access the curriculum that's already been developed by AWS within the academy. So the instructors are able to immediately provide the resources that for this cloud computing certification courseware to their students. This is free, so instructors and students are able to participate and take this program at no charge to them. Not only did they gain relevant skills in cloud computing, which, as we know, is one of the jobs and skills out there that's in highest demand today, but they are able to actually obtain certifications. So imagine your job readiness if you're coming out of, if you're graduating from your university or school and you've got the cloud computing certification. You already have proof and evidence that you're skilled with, that you have the skill. It's also, instructors have a high value pre-built curriculum in front of them that they can use and bring to their students. So it's been a huge win. They've actually, back in October, I think, hit their million learner milestone. So we've seen over a million customers, a million students at this point enroll and take the AWS Academy cloud computing software program. So super exciting to see this one evolve over time. And one of the secrets to this and the secrets to the success of the AWS Academy is that they have brought this learning, they've made it super accessible. So as I mentioned, instructors, it's a plug and play kind of model. So they're able to immediately bring this content into that course within their LMS. And the way AWS Academy has chosen to do this is to leverage LTI. So they made the courseware and curriculum compatible with the learning systems they knew they were going to need to reach. And as we talk about breaking down these silos, one of the ways we really want to focus on here is making it accessible. So bringing that curriculum to your learners where they are. And oftentimes that means thinking about the systems that you're bringing it into, and identifying how you're going to do that. So when AWS was first designing this academy, they understood that LTI was sort of the universal standard to support education-based platforms. So they immediately were looking for ways to leverage LTI to bring this content and curriculum to their student audience. The content themselves doesn't necessarily have to be LTI. In this case, they've chosen to develop content in multiple formats that matched pace with the courseware they want to deliver and the learner experience. And they're leveraging LTI as that universal link or way for that content to be accessible in the LMS. So I think the huge success here for them is not only are they providing relevant, valuable skills and certifications to these students, but they made it easy for the instructors and the educators to access and incorporate that curriculum into their course. So that's a great example of pre-skilling, or finding ways and seeing how corporate is helping support that concept of pre-skilling or student workforce readiness. Um, on the other side of the equation, we have Genius SIS, who is finding ways to help bridge that gap and provide and bring higher education-based programming to corporate clients. And they're finding, so they've got their customers now are those higher ed institutions that have valuable educational resources that they can provide to back to the community through their corporate partners. So they're able to leverage things they've already built, the curriculum they already have, and making it available for, when we say non-degreed learners, think about somebody that's a non-degreed learner, for in this case would be somebody that's first job is a career, and they're learning to enhance and supplement their career. So these non-degreed learners might be anything from an executive MBA program or something of that ilk. So Genius SIS has been able to help bridge this gap and make available the higher education programming historically built within an education-based LMS, and making it accessible and easy for non-degreed learners to access through their corporate LMS, or even enroll directly into those institution LMSs or programs. They've been able to leverage grant funding to provide displaced workers with educational opportunities. So this is the place where we start thinking about reskilling and how to make that valuable educational content available to the workforce for them to find their next job. And as I mentioned, we've got the executive training here. So think about things like an executive MBA program. They're making those available within the community. And this is a place where they've seen and spent a lot of time helping the community, corporate partners, and local universities tear down some of those silos and talk to each other. What do we need? What's your next job that you need to be hiring? Let's make sure we have programming that supports that. And it's been a win-win. There's actually a place here where their higher ed customers have actually found another revenue stream. So not only are they, helping train, partner with these corporations to gain valuable curriculum on one end of things, like we saw in the AWS example, but they're also finding opportunities here where their valuable curriculum can actually be a revenue generator for the institution as it's made available to their corporate partners within the community. So pretty symbiotic relationship there, and it's really fun to see this on both sides of the equation. Okay, so we've talked a little, so we've kind of built up the story from how did we get to where we are today, and we've kind of hopefully given you some examples or inspiration for what you might be most interested in diving into first. So the next part of the conversation is really, how do we get there? What can we do next to have more stories like we just looked at with AWS Academy and Genius SIS? How do we break down these barriers further and encourage collaboration and partnership? So I know we've got the last poll question of the day, but are there areas that you are focused on? Maybe coming into this conversation today, you were already focused on them, or you've got something that that's been brewing, and today's conversation maybe just kind of pushed you over the edge to pursue further. Excellent. Okay. I'm watching the numbers change a little bit here as the polls coming in, but I'm feeling like upskilling. Uh, uh, it looks like upskilling is actually leading by a little bit. I feel like I'm watching the Kentucky Derby. So upskilling seems to be the place where people are excited to go first, which makes sense. I think when we think about the audience that joined that we have here today, and thinking about the split on the upskilling side of things, I imagine this is a place where we're going to see our educational institutions find and be inspired by ways to partner with corporate to bring their valuable curriculums to their corporate partners. Um, so we can talk about things on both sides of the equation, but I think how do we get there? Where do we go from here? It really comes down to thinking about ways to collaborate. So identifying opportunities to collaborate and think about what that might look like, whether you're looking at the curriculum you have today, if you're on the institution side of things, or if you're on the corporate side of things, what initiatives do you have in front of you? And if those require supplementing your corporate training programs today with more skills-based centric things, look to your education partners, whether it's in your community or globally. Um, be open to thinking about where can you supplement and enhance your training programs today with some of these educational resources. Um, Historically, we've sort of thought about these things in the silos, right? So technology doesn't always have to be the barrier. We're starting to see that come down. There are tools and products out there that can help bridge the gap, depending on what your use case is. So I think one of the big benefits that we see with these programs is meeting your learner where you are. But there's ways to overcome some of those technical barriers that we've seen arise over time in that divergence section that we talked about earlier. And one of the ways to do that is to think about an approach to whatever you're doing, whether it's the application that you're using today, the learning platform, courseware that you're building or designing, whether it's with an authoring tool, custom or within the LMS itself. One of the ways to help bring some of these barriers down is to have a more agnostic approach to standards that you're using. So as we've seen earlier, there's sort of de facto standards that you'll find in corporate LMSs. They'll probably be SCORM or XAPI based. And on the ed tech side of things or educational based systems will likely be LTI first. Find find ways to think about using multiple standards. So if you are reaching out in a corporate, if you're on the corporate side of things and you know that you're going to be targeting education as an audience, meet them where they are. Think about ways to leverage LTI as a standard to help tear down some of that wall or barrier, if you will. Whether it's the LMS you use today, ask your vendor if they support LTI to help you reach that audience, or whoever you're working with next or whatever tool you're using. Having that agnostic approach to the standards will help just bring those barriers down or remove some of those barriers to entry. On the recipe side of things, we have a few different products that we've built and provide to the markets to help sort of bring to be standards agnostic, to help support not only this cross collaboration between partners, whether it's direct from corporate and higher ed, but we also work with the vendors that sit in the middle often and provide the software that helps run these LMSs and can support multiple standards. So we do believe you should use the right tool for the job to be done, which is why you'll find all of the standards supported in the products that we offer. We have Content Controller here on the left, and that's often used by our corporate customers as well as content publishers to help distribute their courses across multiple LMSs. It allows you to share content in the standard that makes sense for your customer or target audience. So it helps remove that barrier to entry when you're talking about bringing skills-based content from your organization or company into an education-based system. You can actually make it available as LTI to bring that valuable skills-based content to the learners where they are. Dispatch and Swarm Cloud do similar things here. They also help on that distribution side of things. So we have a few different flavors in how we do this, and we're happy to talk to you further about some of your use cases that you may have here. We also work with all of our learning tech providers, as I mentioned earlier. So a vast majority of the LMSs you see in the market today use one of Rusticy Software's products under the hood. And because we support all of those standards, that means they do also. So if you have an LMS today and you're curious about what standards they support, ask them. They most likely support the one that you picked first, but find out, ask another layer deeper. If you are focused mostly on SCORM today, you may want to ask if LTI is on their roadmap or already supported. If you're on the education side of things, find out from your edtech provider if LTI is the only standard that you're able to bring content in from the outside, or if they also support SCORM or XAPI. Find out what your options are, and then have the conversation collaboratively with your corporate industry partners to figure out the best ways to break down these divides. So that's the program for the day. I do want to make sure if we've gotten any questions from the crowd, this is the time for Q&A. So, I would love to take any questions that people have, if this is inspired or you want to dig in further. And I'm going to look here. I think that we've got a couple of questions that have come in. So let me take a peek here. Okay, so this first question is great. It was actually what we were just sort of talking about. This person asks, it seems like LTI is used primarily in higher education, but it could have value in corporate learning as well to easily consolidate content into a single platform. However, most LMSs and content providers don't offer it. Is there a reason why LTI hasn't been more widely adopted outside of the education space? Great question and great observation. And I think we are seeing LTI start to show up more frequently in corporate-based learning settings than we had previously. And LTI has been around for a long time. So it is not, I think it and SCORM are about the same age. And so it's been around for a long time because it is historically catered to the ed tech space. It hasn't necessarily found its way into many of the corporate learning tools. And some of this, when we talked about the standards earlier and the emergence of these systems that support the different audiences and look different, part of that is the standard itself. So LTI was designed to support a higher ed or education-based environment. And one of the things that LTI does is it captures a grade. So when you think about standards and what kind of data did these standards help you track, on LTI, it was really coming down to a grade. So that was the only data point that the LTI standard supported capturing. And so often, as we talked about, our corporate audience needs to have a little bit more micro level detail on reporting. So they need to capture more than just a grade. And so oftentimes we saw tools that supported the corporate space lean more heavily towards SCORM based on some of that functionality that the standards support differently. And frankly, I think it was just an either or. So back then, it was sort of the understanding was these things really didn't collide or overlap. So LTI and education-based systems sort of grew up in one area. SCORM and XAPI grew up alongside the corporate side of things. And there wasn't a lot of demand for LTI support in those platforms. But I think we're starting to see that that demand sort of diminish as there is more interest today in taking advantage of LTI as a way to plug in tools into a corporate-based learning system. Okay, I've got what standard should I consider for future-proofing our tech stack? What do I need to include in my RFPs today? And I love this question because this is the right time to be asking this question. Often we have people that come to us for help with the standards, and someone has already written the RFP for them, or someone has made a purchasing decision and didn't consider all of the stakeholders. And what we end up with are places where people get sad because the tool that they want to use, the capability or functionality that they need was not accounted for when writing that RFP. So the standards that you should add when you're thinking about future-proofing your tech stack, some of this comes down to who are you, what side of the equation are you on, and what do you want to do next? So we've talked about sort of reskilling our workforce to make sure that they're ready for the job that they will need to be doing in 5 years because things are changing. You want to be thinking about that the same way for your learning system as you're defining those requirements. So as you look at the capability of the standards today and what you need in the future, I would encourage you, if you're in a corporate learning environment setting, to be thinking about XAPI and CMI5. So today, if you're on the corporate side and your LMS that you use today only supports SCORM, you'll want to be thinking about XAPI and CMI5, because most of the tools that support corporate today have already started adding support for XAPI and CMI5 and those capabilities. And that will allow you to collect more granular level detail. It allows you to support a wider variety of learning activities that aren't always browser-based or initiated from the LMS. And it gives you the ability to support and track learning activities that happen anywhere. So whether it's a provider that's providing you with access to simulations, maybe AR, VR types of learning activities, or even mobile apps or something a little bit more hands-on or direct, you're going to have some more flexibility in front of you if you also have support for XAPI and CMI5. If you have the need for SCORM support today, don't forget that one, and don't assume it. Make sure that you're accounting for the assets you have today and what you imagine you'll be doing in the next 5 years. And keep an eye out. We have a lot of webinars that we provide around standards, and what they support, what standard to use for the job to be done. So I think we'll actually be able to post a couple of those resources here in the chat for you. But yeah, better to ask for more than less at this point, to make sure that if your company is signing a 3 to 5 year agreement with an LMS, that you have what you need in the next 3 to 5 years, even if they're not using it today. All right, somebody has brought up, I'm trying to bring up LTI support for my company, but they struggle to see the value it would bring for the dreaded ROI. Yes, so ROI, another hot topic here. We've already heard a little bit about future proofing, making the case for the tools that you're asking for access. And part of that, making the case for that, is the return on investment, or what do we get back as a result of adding support, if we're going to invest in and add more standard support in our applications. If you're purchasing an LMS, asking for building that requirement in on your RFP is one thing. If you're a vendor and you're trying to decide, should we invest in adding LTI support into our application also? um, I'll answer this question from two sides of the equation. If you are an LMS vendor and historically today you've catered to the corporate audience and you support SCORM and maybe XAPI and probably AICC, why would you go to the trouble of investing in and developing LTI support in your application as well? And what we always say here is thinking about the more things on the shelf, the more valuable your LMS is. So adding LTI support to enable your customers to bring in additional learning tools and technologies, or access to curriculum from your education partners as via LTI is the standard to do that, just makes your application more valuable. The more things your learners and your administrators can do within your LMS, just makes it that much more valuable for your customers and for them to be likely to stay and use it more. If you create curriculum and you're trying to figure out, should I invest in making my courseware curriculum content assets available via LTI? Again, it's the other side of the equation. The broader the audience, probably the better for you. You want to increase your reach. And so making a case for adding additional standard support to your application, or to the content that you're building, only increases your footprint and your ability to reach a larger audience. So on the ROI, I would say that would be a couple of cases if you are building tools or content to serve these audiences. If you are, and I think in the context of the question that came up, this was coming from somebody on the vendor side of things. So it's just a broader reach, and it's going to give your customers even that much more they can do with your platform. So I think that's it for the questions that we have today. I will let Tara and Alicia and Josh, who have been running behind the scenes here, and big thank you to them, confirm if there are any other questions. Otherwise, I'm going to fast forward here to the last slide here, just as a wrap up. Thank you for spending time with us this morning and talking about this topic. Great questions. It was really fun to see a nice cross section of people attending across the industry, education, and actually, vendors alike. And we've got our standard motto here is ask us anything, really. And so please, if this has inspired any questions or you want to dig in further, please feel free to drop us a line or reach out direct. Uh, we love this. We talk about this all day long. We have hundreds of customers, hundreds of people, not even just customers. We serve the industry at large, and people come to us every day asking questions on how they can solve standards-based problems as well as learning technology problems, and that's what we're here for. So take us up on our offer and please ask us anything. Thanks for joining.